I remember that fateful day in high school, the day I discovered that the real horrors often dwell within the human heart. It started like any other typical day, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing softly as I entered the maze of lockers and bustling students. I was in the 11th grade, and high school had been a mixed bag of experiences, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded that day. In the hallway, I noticed a group of students huddled together, whispering in hushed tones. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached to see what the commotion was about. There at the center of the group was Jenny Mitchell, a girl from my chemistry class. She was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Her usually cheerful demeanor had been replaced by an expression of sheer terror. When she saw me, she rushed forward, gripping my arm tightly. "You won't believe what happened, Sam," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I found something in my locker this morning." Her eyes darted around the hallway, as if afraid someone might be eavesdropping. "What did you find?" I asked, growing increasingly concerned. Jenny led me to her locker, which was just a few steps away. As she opened it, a sickening smell wafted out, a putrid mix of decay and something unidentifiable. Inside, the source of the smell became apparent. There, amidst her textbooks and school supplies, lay a decapitated bird, its feathers matted with blood. My stomach churned and my mind reeled. The grotesque sight was enough to send shivers down my spine. A cruel prank, I thought. Someone had taken things way too far. We reported it to the school authorities and they promised to investigate, but the feeling of unease lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. Over the next few weeks, the terror escalated. Jenny wasn't the only victim. Dead animals, mutilated and left in lockers, appeared throughout the school. Birds, rodents, even a pet rabbit once. No one seemed safe, and fear hung in the air like a heavy fog. Students whispered and accused each other, but no one ever confessed to the disturbing acts. The school became a breeding ground for paranoia and mistrust. Friendships fractured, and a suffocating atmosphere of dread pervaded every corner. The staff was at a loss, unable to pinpoint the culprits behind these sadistic acts. It wasn't until one day while I was walking home that I stumbled upon a chilling discovery. A group of my classmates had gathered in a dimly lit alley behind the school. Their faces were contorted with a strange mixture of fear and satisfaction as they hovered over a small caged animal. It was a rat, squirming and squeaking in terror. My heart sank as I realized that they were the ones responsible for the grotesque displays in the lockers. They were the monsters, finding twisted pleasure in inflicting terror on their fellow students. I couldn't fathom the darkness that had taken root in their hearts. Suddenly, one of them turned his head around and locked eyes with me. Almost immediately, he stood up and sprinted towards me without saying a word. Adrenaline shot through my body and I ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction, not daring to look back. I ran across roads, past shops, and through parks for what felt like an hour. Luckily, I ran track at school, so I was athletic enough to keep going. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I stopped to look back and he was gone. I had no idea where I was at this point, so I called my mom to pick me up. I didn't know the area at all, so I had to walk to a nearby Walmart to give her a pointer as to where I could be. When she arrived and we were on our way home, she kept asking what happened, and I finally just told her that me and my friends were hanging out and they ditched me. Typical for kids in my school to do to someone, so this didn't surprise her. When I got home, I reported them to the authorities, and they were expelled from school, and police was involved. But the damage had been done. The horrors of that time left a permanent scar on my psyche, a stark reminder that sometimes the most disturbing horrors are created by the very people you thought you knew. The events of that terrifying day are etched into my memory like a nightmare I can't forget. It was a warm afternoon at Southside High School, where I was in my senior year. The sun cast long shadows across the bustling schoolyard as I left my last class of the day. My footsteps echoed in the empty hallways as I made my way to the parking lot. The hallways that were usually teeming with students were now deserted, and an eerie silence seemed to hang in the air. I couldn't help but feel an unsettling sense of vulnerability. I was alone, and the emptiness of the place only accentuated that fact. As I approached my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around nervously, scanning the empty parking lot. There, among the trees on the fringe of the lot, I saw a figure. A man, dressed in tattered clothing, with his face concealed by a dirty hoodie. My heart began to race, and I felt a shiver of unease crawl down my spine. His eyes, however, were visible beneath the hood, and they locked onto mine with an intense predatory focus. "Hey there," he called out in a voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Need a ride?" Now, I'm used to getting catcalled by creepy guys, but this time it seemed different. His words were loaded with a malevolent undertone, and I was instantly filled with dread. I tried to ignore him, picking up my pace as I fumbled for my car keys. "You're a pretty thing," he continued, his tone oozing with something dark and sinister. "What's the rush? I can take you anywhere you want to go." Fear gripped me, and my fingers fumbled for my keys as I tried to unlock my car. Panic set in, and I could feel his presence drawing nearer. The only sound I could hear was the deafening thud of my own heartbeat. Finally, I got inside and locked the doors, but as I started the engine and pulled away from the parking spot, I saw him in my rearview mirror. He was following me, a sinister silhouette in a battered vehicle that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The streets were clogged with traffic, and I had no plan. I just knew that I couldn't lead him to my home. My phone lay on the passenger seat, but I couldn't risk taking my eyes off the road to call for help. With my heart pounding, I made a series of sharp turns, trying to lose my pursuer. Each corner I took felt like a gamble, and I could sense his relentless determination to stay close behind me. My only hope was to shake him somehow. I made a decision to head towards the local police station, hoping that safety lay within its walls. But as I approached the station, my heart sank. He was still behind me, edging closer with every turn. Panicking, I couldn't lead him to the police station either. I needed to come up with another plan. So I swerved into a gas station, praying that the bright lights and the presence of other people would deter him. As I leaped out of the car, I dashed inside and pleaded with the cashier to call the police. She did, and I hid behind a rack of snacks, watching through the shelves as the man parked his car and entered the station. My heart hammered against my ribcage as he scanned the store, searching for me. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. Then, the distant wail of police sirens pierced the air, growing louder with each passing second. The man seemed to panic, knowing that the police were closing in. He turned and fled the store, vanishing into the night. The police arrived, and I gave them a description of the man and his vehicle. They assured me they would do everything they could to track him down. With a mix of relief and lingering fear, I made it home safely that night. I still shudder when I think about that night in high school. For some context, I am a 17-year-old girl at about 5'2" and 100, and nothing pounds, so pretty small. I wear glasses and I guess can be considered the quiet and nerdy type, so I usually get creepy guys try and talk to me, but never like this before. Anyway, let's get to it. It was late, way past the usual hours, and I found myself at Hillcrest High, the empty halls bathed in the cold, pale light of the moon. I was there to finish a project that had been hanging over my head for days, and I figured I'd be the only one in the school at that hour. As I hunched over my work in the dimly lit library, the silence of the school was oppressive. My only company was the faint sound of my pen scratching against paper. But then a creaking noise interrupted the quiet, like someone moving about in the shadows. Startled, I turned to see Mr. Hackett, the school's janitor, standing just outside the library door. His eyes, tired and bloodshot, met mine, and his unkempt hair seemed to stand on end, adding to his disheveled appearance. "Working late, huh?" he mumbled, his voice a hoarse whisper. Yeah," I stammered, "just trying to finish this project." He approached, his footsteps slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. His gaze never left me, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "You know, the school can be a lonely place at night," he said, a strange smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You should have some company." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. This was no ordinary conversation. His words felt like a veiled threat, and his presence was undeniably sinister. I gathered my things and tried to make a quick exit, but he blocked my path, his eyes now cold and calculating. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, a wicked glint in his eye. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone to dial 911, but as I raised it to my ear, he lunged at me, knocking the phone from my hand. We struggled, and in the dim light I could see his face contorted with malice. I had no chance with this man, and as I fought to break free, his grip tightened, his fingers like a vice around my throat. My vision blurred and the world began to spin. Desperation set in as I clawed at his hand, trying to scream, but my voice was silenced by his unrelenting hold. Just when I thought I couldn't fight any longer, a security guard happened upon the scene, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Mr. Hackett released his grip and fled, disappearing into the shadows. The security guard called the police, and I gave a statement about the chilling encounter. They searched for Mr. Hackett, but he was never found. I learned that he had a history of strange behavior, but nothing that would have indicated he was capable of such a horrifying act. To this day, I can't forget that night. The feeling of his hands around my throat, his sinister smile etched in my memory. I later found out that he was fired and taken into custody. Even though I was glad he was gone, that was the last time I would ever do work at school that late.